nerve cluster near the surface with deep-run roots, concentrated into a focal point less than 100 yards in diameter. Humans seemed intuitively drawn to such places of power, even when oblivious to their ecological significance. Many worlds had died by Elith's hand, almost all of their deaths wrought in the midst of some thriving city or imposing government complex or protected sacred ground. She made her way down the mountainside and across the saddle, ever watchful. The saddle was peppered with spear-like pines and Revik's peculiar, wispy red-hued furs, and carried a dense, earthy scent. She had to mind her footing as she picked her way across the needle-blanketed terrain, dotted with its little fractal forests of moss. As she approached the edge of the forest, she paused within its dark borders to take final stock of her target. The palace was mostly unlit, save for the pools of orange from security lights at regular intervals along the walls. There were 6 of these, each roughly 12 feet high, separating the centermost residential building from the outer grounds. Based on her estimate of the threadline's size, she judged that she'd have to get beyond at least the 5th wall to carry out her strike. That was a lot of walls to put between her and her escape. One thing at a time. She'd get within the minimal kill zone and evaluate from there. She emerged from the tree line and crept shadowed across the open ground toward the eastern side of the palace, pausing whenever guards patrolled into view. Once she reached the outermost wall, she crouched at its base. Its stacked stones were irregular and rounded in the traditional fashion of the region, leaving enough useful gaps for Elith's skilled hands and feet. She spidered to the top, lay flat on the wide surface for 2 breaths to ensure no personnel were immediately below, then slipped over and down the opposite side. The grounds within the walls had the marks of having been well manicured. Curving paths of hand-laid stone flowed over lush, pale yellow grass, like wide rivers amid prairie. Pocket gardens dotted the scape. But to Elith's careful eye, signs showed of disorder seeping in at all the edges. The height of the grass was uneven, overdue for cutting, and the once sharp borders of path and garden had grown fuzzy and indistinct. Elith navigated from shadow to shade. The 2nd and 3rd walls were as easily overcome as the 1st. Reaching the 4th took more care. The previous grounds had been decorative, but largely transitional spaces. But here, between the 3rd and 4th walls, they opened up in a meandering way, punctuated with small structures. From Elith's previous observation, she'd gathered these were workshops and general quarters for palace staff. There was little activity, but the broken sightlines and patchwork shadows slowed her progress. Patrols moved over the grounds, emerging from blind corners or materializing piecemeal out of the scattered cover of sculpted trees and hedges. Elith's previous patient reconnaissance repaid her. Instinct cautioned her to pause or spurred her to move before she had fully scanned for trouble. Some part of her subconscious fed her patterns of movement she could not have described and led her safely undetected to the further wall. It was between the 4th and 5th walls that her danger heightened. Sentries patrolled in greater numbers and in crisscrossing patterns. The increased activity spoke of increased importance. Indeed, the various buildings she could see were larger, more ornate. She navigated her way through the patrols, but as she approached the 5th wall, she was forced to stop. 8 pairs of sentries were stationed in a shallow zigzag pattern, each within constant sight of at least 2 others. Elith studied them for a time, watching to see which pairs were silent and which were prone to conversation, where focus was strong and where it was weak. As was human tendency, they'd position themselves close to or under lights. The gaps between left narrow channels of darkness with little room for error. She identified her best point of access between 2 of the chattiest sets of guards. It would be close, and nothing was ever certain, but if she stayed low enough, Elith felt she could slip through unnoticed. She went down on her belly, pressed into the soft grass, and began a slow crawl along a seam of darkness. Her path took her closer to the forwardmost pair of sentries. As she neared,